Okay, so what we have to do now is we have to sort of bring together all the four chapters of Shimshon. And by the way, Dalila wrote to me about the origin of her name, which is great. She's amazing, right? So you can ask her, she'll tell you. Really, really. She's like, if you have any other questions, ask me. You know what? She's amazing. Um, so you have what I want to share with you. I'm going to share with you Rabbi Hatton's insights into this, which I think is really we'll pick it up where I left off last time. So when we left off the last chapter, is that it said in end of 16, Vayikbru also bein Sar bein Eshtaol, that they buried him after Shimshon knocks down the building, the whole bit, between Sarah and Eshtaol, which then we immediately drew back to the beginning of the story when it says that he was bein Sarah Eshtaol, that same phrase. So as if the narrator or the author or the writer or whatever you want to put it is drawing your attention to bookend these things. Okay. So if I had to ask you, like, what are some of the themes of this Shimshon story? Could be occurrences, it could be whatever. What are some of the themes that you might um, uh, draw out so far? Treachery, okay. But caused by what? Yeah, caused by what? I mean, how does he get involved with them? Because he falls for them. He gets, he's enticed by these.
Carnal,
Yeah,
carnal desire.
yeah, these Philistine. This is wait, Alex, I'm very young. You have to like let's.
Trying to.
I know. I'm just for the TVMA audience. There's these Philistine women, and each time like they try, like a couple times we see that they try to like get to his secret. They want to figure out how to conquer him, and he kind of plays around with it, and then finally gives it away because they're like nudging him so much. Really, really, and then we have this story of Tallulah. Now, what happens? Like, if you look at how the buildup of how she tries to get to him, she's like, "Tell me the secret." So first he tells her something, then he tells her something, but we have to look at it carefully, and it reveals a lot. First the seven like moist, wet spaghetti noodles. That's what he gets tied with. The first seven, nothing. Then new ropes that have never been used, nothing. Then she like ties seven locks into her hair, no. And then finally, the hair when she like she rubs his head, he falls asleep, she cuts his hair, the whole thing. Okay. Um, what's interesting also is that okay, so that's the story that we know, and I would ask you like if you had to describe Shimshon as a leader.
Sounds pretty stupid.
Stupid. Okay, that's an interesting word. Stupid. Stupid. Why? Because like, what is he?
Smart man each time. He knew she told each time, but
Yeah.
he still told
So you're
her.
saying specifically in the Delilah incident? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Is it possible that maybe he knew what he was doing? I mean, why does he get involved with these women to begin with? What does he think is going to happen? So remember, we saw the Radak early on. The Radak said that, oh, this Chas v'shalom, he wore only a white bekasha and he chalav Yisrael kind of thing. But he converted all the women that he was with. Okay, maybe. Um, yes, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Um, but he also says that, and many of the Farshim point this out. So I'll just say that if all of this was a pretext for executing vengeance on the Plishtim, okay, as a brilliant attempt to solve the problem that may absolve us of the need for the conversion argument at all. Eventually, Radak argues that Shimshon's intentions were to antagonize the Philistine overlords so that he could coax them into battle and defeat them, and then, of course, free Bnei Israel from their torment. But what better way to foment friction than the time-honored trigger of ethnic strife known as intermarriage? Right? So ironically, Radak's interpretation of this point could be reversed, where we'd assume that the Plishtim women in question were not converted. So that's the question on the Radak. Okay, fine. But they have this question, like, how could he be with them? What was so if you say that his whole motivation and motive was to get in with the Philistines and do that, well, then he accomplished that, right? Interesting also to point out, and this is something that, again, this is why you read the super commentaries, especially the modern commentaries, is that the look at the numbers that are involved in the story. Okay. Um, and it builds up to this sort of, and he calls it a dramatic climactic conclusion. Okay. The first encounter that he has with the Plishtim, there are he has the first wedding guest. There are 30 guests. Remember, they have that whole bet. And I'll pay for the 30 things and the 30 cloaks if you lose the bet, if you solve the riddle, the whole thing. And of course, she is treacherous and she gets it out of him, and he ends up having to pay up. But then he kills 30 of them. Right? So it's 30 and 30. That's the first story. Okay. Then, with the foxes, how many foxes were there? 300. 300 foxes. Okay. Um, and then finally, when he gets handed over to the Plishtim, and it says that the if you look in Perak in 1511, look in 1511, 1511, okay. Right. All right, 3,000, okay. And then finally, at the end, who dies at the end in the last thing? Uh, there are 3,000 people like that are again, so it's like 30, 300, 3,000. So, I mean, you could say it's literal numbers, yeah. Yeah, but I'm saying like the way you look at these things in a holistic sense, and that's why, because it's bookended by that phrase, Bain Tzara Avein Eshtaol, like look at the whole thing as one unit, and you'll see 30, 300, 3,000. It's meant to say like there's something that's building up here, okay? Then you have these women, okay? And this I'm just gonna again I'm gonna share. It's brilliant the way he writes this. In my opinion, but he does not need my approbation, but he's just a great writer. Finally, the literary unity is emphasized by the triad of Philistine women that propel the plot forward from its innocuous beginning to its dramatic end. A story that is told in two parts is outlined above, with the interlude, of course, of his dalliance with the Gazan prostitute. The parallels between the two halves of the story are pronounced. They both begin with a Philistine female, and he takes an unhealthy romantic interest. Wait, what was the word used? Carnal desire? That's the word used? Okay. I'm gonna get in trouble for that. Maybe I'll get canceled if I'm lucky. Um, Both pivot on some kind of mystery regarding Shimshon and his strength that must be unraveled by his nemesis. And both conclude with a lethal confrontation that leads to Philistine casualties. The interlude in Gaza incorporates this femme fatale theme, while simultaneously highlighting the Philistine astonishment at a man who could uproot the bolted city gates and bear them on his shoulder. Like they're so strong, okay? So this, more intriguingly, there's an element of constraint of his. It's another theme. If you look at it carefully, they're constantly trying to tie him up. He's physically, he's constantly being bound, okay? And that informs both halves as well. In this feature that holds key to understanding the essence of the story, after he binds the foxes and he lets them loose with torches, the enemy masses for attack. Hoping to avert a Philistine onslaught, they arrest the errant judge in order to turn him in. So he makes no attempt to resist. He only extracts a pledge that, don't kill me, he says to the men of Yehuda. And he says that and by the way, incidentally highlighting his utter refusal to fight for his own kinsmen. So they agree. What do when they hand him over? They bind him with new ropes. Right? That's in Perak Tezvav and Pasuk Yud Gimel. Because like new ropes are better than old ropes. Okay. So he approaches, and then of course the ropes that are holding him, they fall apart like flax. Okay. So he says in the interlude, there's no explicit binding of the hero, but there's an implicit one. For the city of Gaza is surrounded by stout walls, and the gates of the city are bolted with heavy beams. He's effectively held captive in Gaza. Every time I read that line, it's just kind of really just jarring. As the Plishtim bide their time, confident that he will not escape their grasp. But at midnight, he gets up, he breaks his bonds, he breaks his cords by lifting he doesn't just like break the ropes, he takes the gates, he removes the gates with the bolt, the whole bit, okay? And as the second half of the story, so you have first Plishtim woman, second Plishtim woman, in the middle you have this story when he's in Gaza and he's held captive for 10 minutes, whatever it is. But for the second half of the story involving Delilah, it emphasizes this theme of constraint to the extreme. There are four tyings, right? The first three that we mentioned, okay? And then the fourth one where she actually cuts his hair. Um, each time she says, "Oh, Plishtim are coming. The Plishtim are coming," right? And he breaks loose and he goes to the enemy. Now, here he says we have to pay close to the details. Um, the extended frolic between Shimshon and Delilah seems droll, if not somewhat depraved. I like that. We don't use the word droll enough. A love affair indeed, in which the woman makes it abundantly clear on multiple occasions that her intentions are malicious, and the man continues to comply, fully aware that the story will end with a downfall by her hands. Right? You said he's stupid. I mean, I don't know what droll, what does droll mean? I have to look it up. It's not a word we use like,
Ugh.
yeah, yeah. But we're gonna look it up for real. Manhattan's too smart for me. Um, okay, search a word or phrase. Droll. 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 There you go. Droll. Amusing in an odd way, whimsically humorous, waggish.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Meaning like she keeps asking him and he keeps giving in. Like what's going on here? Like, is this a game? Or it seems like to lead to your assessment, okay? And he gladly entertains each time she asks him. However, there are two small details which merit closer attention. First, we notice that as her appeals progress, he comes closer and closer to revealing the truth. Right? His first response is non-committal and simply suggests that new and moist cores are needed. Moist gut or plant fiber is, of course, very flexible, but possesses much less tensile strength than material which has been dried and then spun to form cords. To use moist gut or plant fiber to bind someone is the most dependable method, and perhaps Shimshon is preying on her pagan superstitions by suggesting a magical quality to the act. Okay. In any case, in his first admission, Shimshon draws no attention to the fact that his long mane of hair is the true source of his strength. Nothing about hair. The theme of binding is now repeated in the second response, new ropes. While reminding us of his binding by the men of Yehuda, which we had in the previous chapter with the new ropes, which didn't work, it doesn't suggest much else to Delilah other than the possibility of his capture. The third response, if you will weave 7 locks of my hair into the web, is more intriguing and indicates for the first time that somehow Shimshon's strength is connected to his hair. But of course, in spite of her faithful attention to his instructions, he's unsubdued, even as she goes one step beyond the weaving and securely holds down his locks with a peg. That was not mentioned there. So parenthetically, it should be noted that here our narrative forcefully parts ways with the Hollywood portrayals. I love the Hollywood portrayals. In other words, if you had a cast Shimshon in the movie, who would you cast for him? Give me an actor that you would play Shimshon. Long hair, okay. But and people go like the Schwarzenegger and Conan the Barbarian type. Okay, but what he's saying, no, yeah, that's exactly that's wrong. That's the wrong assessment. It's what you would take probably like Woody Allen with the long hair.
Look.
Because that's what makes it so bizarre. If he's a big, strong guy, okay, I get it here, right? Right? The Philistines are consistently astonished by his strength and go to great lengths to ascertain its source. This is a sure indication that Shimshon's physique was nothing other than completely unremarkable. By the way, it's not a good thing to be called completely unremarkable. Right? So how's your date? How's the guy? Oh, he was completely unremarkable. It's good. Nice. Well, he's good looking. Completely unremarkable. Yikes. If he possessed the muscular build of a Titan, if he was Schwarzenegger, right, there would have been a little mystery about the source of his superhuman strength. He's a strong guy, okay. But because his physique was like that of an ordinary man, they couldn't figure it out. Okay, now let's get to the hair bit. He goes the secret of the hair. Um, each time he tells her, he's getting closer and closer. Like, why even mention the hair? Just think about it. Like, why would he even go close? If he knows that's the source of his strength, why would he even go close to that? First, tie me with wet strings, then tie me with new strings, and then take a lock of my hair, and then finally, it's the hair. Like, I would just say tie my feet. Like, why would he even go close to that? What does that indicate to you? What do you think?
Wants to get caught.
Oh, exactly. That's where we're gonna go. He wants to get caught, or he wants to give him the secret. By the way, they say it's harder to like one of the hardest things to do is to keep in a secret. Yeah, they're like, oh, such a geschmack piece of lashon hara or something. I know I have something. Oh, yes, correct. But like, so why? So before we get to the climax here, like, what do you think? Like, why would he want to give it up?
You want to be submissive to.
You're saying things.
No, but
No, no, it's very good. It's just like I'm just trying to clean this up a little bit. See, everybody's like, "Oh, you see, I know I got to come to this class." Um, a final tantalizing detail may help us assemble the pieces into a coherent reading. While he first replies to Delilah appear to offer dead-end clues to the source of his strength, we notice that the third response is more revealing, while the fourth actually gives the secret. Examining the responses more clearly highlights a common literary thread. While the first three responses revolve around constraints that are then broken, they all generate similar imagery. Cords, ropes, and an incomplete web on the loom all have filament-like features that form both the main part of the item as well as its extension. Okay, like when I get my extensions done, it's hours and hours in this. The fact that I even know that is just okay. Um, I have a girl house. What do you want? A length of biblical rope, for instance, is made of date palm fibers that are tightly twisted together to form a coil. At its end, the rope unravels to become loose threads. Long, supple cords of animal sinews or plant fibers are composed of individual strands that are spun together, but at the extremities they begin to untangle. The web of the loom is where the threads of the warp are painstakingly inserted into the woof, what they call the warp and the woof, in order to form the textile. But at the ends, there is no weave, but only unconnected vertical or horizontal threads. You ever have that? Like you have, I don't know, something that's like tied on, or it could be a shoelace. It could be something, and at the end it becomes frayed. Tzitzis. Oh my God, it could drive you crazy. The strings of the tzitzis. If you look around shul, not that you're ever bored in shul, but if you ever bored in shul, check out the men's tallis strings, and like some of them are like all over the place, right? Some are missing this and that, or if you just look at the ones that they have in shul, like you have to look and see they get all frayed. In short, um, all the items under consideration have a certain hair-like appearance. Hair. You ever deal with split ends? I use L'Oreal, and it helps me deal with split ends, right? Constantly. It's one of the most annoying. I don't know if it's new. I don't think it's new, but annoying teenage girl habit is like the stipitzling with the hair always constantly like you talk to somebody and it's almost as bad as saying like and maybe and basically and literally. It's like you're just talking and they're like, stop. It's a tick. It's something. But and I also like constantly like, let me look at the split ends. Okay. But it's all hair like. Okay. Um, Each time the hair is first held in check and then let loose. The three items in question are not about constraint, but they're reminiscent of hair that is bound and then let loose. Shimshon alludes to all this in his penultimate revelation to the Philistine. If you will weave the 7 locks of my hair into the web, the hair didn't grow loose, but was gathered into 7 discrete locks, now fraying at the ends, which actually resemble the cords and the ropes all along. What do we say when somebody wants to let loose?
unravel.
Or we say like you let your hair down, you know, like, and there is, let's say people who women especially like if they cover their hair all the time. Okay, so my favorite pastime, it's like one thing that I notice a lot. Like as soon as my wife can get her shaitel off, it is off. Like it's hard. I don't envy any woman that does that. I have a tremendous amount of admiration, and I think it's really something. Um, I don't know if that's what God had in mind. I don't know, because sometimes the shaitels look better than the real hair. Often, that's why Sephardim don't wear shaitels, by the way. Ravad Yosef was very much against shaitels because it actually is counter what it's supposed to accomplish. Okay, fine. But we wear shaitels and the amount of money they spend on shaitel, like, how much money is ridiculous, okay? But the feeling like I can't wait to get this thing off. Okay. Um, so in that light, we're gonna kind of look at Shimshon of like, he can't wait to get this thing off. What's this thing? Like what's burdening him? what's bringing him, I'll share with you what he writes inside. It's beautiful. Is that he's given this lot in life that he never asked for. He didn't. He was born with it. Now, how many people do we know that are born into something and have no desire to go into it? It could be royalty. It could be kahuna. Somebody's a Cohen. Wait, are you telling me that I can't marry, Christina that I met in college or whatever or whoever just because I'm a Cohen? But she converted. She did a proper conversion. Even so, I'm sorry. Cohen, you can't marry a convert. Sorry. That's. So then they have this thing on. I'm going to renounce my kahuna. I will de-Cohenize myself. I have a little bit of a secret for you. You cannot do that. It just simply doesn't work. So, and we run into all kinds of problems, by the way, lots and lots of issues. Now, that is not, again, it's not a logical thing. People then they get very defensive about it. You're discriminating. Da, 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 da. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, we are because that's what the Torah says in Parashas Emor. Isha zonah v'chalal lo yikacha v'isha g'shmein lo yikacha. I don't make up the rules. That's how it is. So you're born into something. I don't want to do it. Now that's a very extreme case, obviously, but let's say you have people that are born into, let's say certain family lines. You look at the people are obsessed with the royal family. Do you watch any of that nonsense? The all the shows and whatever? Of course you do. Okay. I only watched the parts that dealt with Diana, only because I was a big admirer of hers. I just thought she was like a pretty impressive person. I remember when she died, we were first married. What?
Yeah, least impressive part of the show.
Okay, I didn't watch the rest of it. I don't know. I just only because like that's what I knew about because I knew her. I knew her. I knew like
Waited for them.
I remember when we were kids that we stayed up like all night to watch the wedding because it was in the middle and it was like in the morning here. Like I don't know, it was whatever it was, but I remember watching the wedding and she was probably one of the most beautiful women you ever saw in your life. Arguably, I think you could say that. But then you're like, Nebuch. Oh my God. And like today, people are obsessed and constantly every day in the paper, there's something about the kid, this one, I don't know, the dress, she stole that. Who cares? I don't care. I'm not, but it's like it's a big, if you look in a bookstore about the books about the royal family, wow, wow, wow. It's like almost as big as the sports books. It's a sport for some people. But because what it is, it's about people that are born into something. Now there they could renounce it. Has a lot of repercussions. And then there's the cousins that have all their whole mess now. I don't know. I'm not really holding. I just see what I see in the paper. But some people are overly burdened with something that they're born into, and they just don't want to do it. Let's give perhaps the most common example of this is people that are born into religious families, into observant families. And they just say, this is what I've done my whole life, and this and that. I just don't want to do it. We know anybody like that? Well, hello. There's also a great genre of books are people that grew up in like Hasidic homes and they went completely off the derech and then they discovered that there's things like reading and writing and computers and internet and like this and that. Started like Shalom Dean's book was probably like the first of that.
Every single one is like Sean Dean's book, which is that you can't really escape it and you end up having Shabbos dinner with chicken and pizza
Yeah.
with a bunch of other people who are in the same situation.
Right. And they find each other. I remember my wife, God bless her, she's amazing, but she said like she wanted to save him. He doesn't want you to save him. Like, yeah. She's like, it's like I want to invite him for Shabbos dinner. I'm like, yeah, he doesn't want like but there is that. And everybody has to, there's no guarantee. You could do everything right. You send your kids to the best schools and camps, and you have a beautiful home, and you sing Zmiris at Shabbos. There's no guarantee that it's going to take. If it does, it's a bracha. It's a tremendous bracha, right? And how many people become observant from when they come from nothing? No observance whatsoever, right? My father, his whole life was considered the black sheep of the family because he became observant. Like they looked down on him because, and meanwhile, he's the only one with Jewish grandkids. Like that's how it goes, right? That's America. So you can now in that lens, we can move forward to this and say maybe that's what like Shimshon. He's like he wanted to give it up. Why? Listen to this. We're now in a position to understand the true nature of his replies. He intended to reveal his secret to Delilah all along, hoping that his hints would be enough for her to guess the correct answer on her own. The answer, Delilah, has to do with cords and ropes, with warps and woofs and locks of hair. It's as if Shimshon longed for Delilah to solve his terrible secrets so she might finally cut his locks and rid him of his Nazarite freight forever. I love that. His Nazarite freight. Freight is not like a backpack. Freight is like, oh my God, this is weighing me down like crazy. The tragedy of Shimshon is the tragedy of a man who was burdened with an identity that he did not choose, with a mission for which he did not ask, and with a destiny that he could not avoid. For the child will be a Nazarite from his birth, as we know. Isn't that how many Jewish people have felt like that, certainly in the last 2 years? Like, I just want to go to college. I just want to study my courses. I just want to get my grades, and I want to get a good job in this horrible job market. Right? Leave me alone. I don't want to be a campus warrior. I'm not interested in your apartheid Palestinian wall, this and that. I couldn't get I just like, okay. But you can't escape the destiny. Oh, you're a Jew? You dirty Jew, you whatever, whatever, whatever. You can't escape the destiny. This then is the hero's predicament. The source of his strength is the Nazarite hood that offers restraint and self-control, precious values in short supply, even as the Israelites slide deeper and deeper into the morass of Canaanite idolatry and relativism. You just gotta like it when good words are all together in the same sentence. It's a nice thing. I wish that, my children would appreciate that. Nobody likes reading anymore. What can I tell you? Working on it, my son, he's 10 and he does not like reading. And then I said to my wife, I'm like, listen, when I was his age, I don't like reading either. The last thing we could do is if we really pressure him, he's going to hate it forever. So at least maybe there's a shot because he is exactly me, for better or for worse. But I hated to read. But now now nobody has to read because you just throw something at the ChatGPT, gives me a summary and this and that, boom, 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 boom. I have never used ChatGPT. I don't use it. But that very strength is itself a terrible existential weight, for it was placed upon what? Me? First of all, if you know me, I don't write speeches. Do you know that? I don't. There's only 3 times a year that I write speeches. Actually, no. Let me. I'm giving you trade secrets here, okay? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I write out my speeches, and people who know me and see me, they could tell the difference of when it's like, yeah, that's like not your usual. I'm just reading off notes is very uncomfortable for me. Also at weddings. At weddings, I use note cards and I'm very specific because a wedding is a very proper thing. It has to be just the right way, etc. But it's not, and I have my ways that I could do it. But otherwise, I don't write speeches down. I can't. Part of also why I write my speeches is now I'm thinking like with posterity, my kids will have them and they'll have them forever, God willing. And because, I'm not going to be around forever and I want them to remember me. They'll remember me for some other things also. This is where we turn dark. Okay. And this weather outside is like, okay. But that very strength is itself a terrible existential weight, for it was placed upon Shimshon before his birth to become his self-fulfilling prophecy. In this life, the otherwise bizarre feature of his narrative can now be illuminated. Shimshon, chosen by God to rescue his people, burdened with a message of austerity and self-discipline, devotion to God and a higher calling, chafes against his election. For what man can embrace a mission imposed with rigor? Thus he seeks out those who represent the antithesis of his calling, the Philistine sirens who promise him succor in the form of mindless living, descended to decadence and self-gratification, and worship of the pagan gods of wine and song, who ask nothing of their adherents except that they surrender their souls. It's like, I don't want any of this. I don't want any shul. I don't want any Torah. I don't want any mitzvahs. Let me just go so I can just be myself and don't. Isn't it enough that you ever heard this? Rabbi, isn't it enough just to be a good person? I get that a lot. Like, no, it's not enough. Because what does that mean, good person? You have to have rules. You have to have guidelines. You have to have structure. Me, good person. Tikkun olam. Yeah. Whatever. But you can understand that people feel very burdened by, you might say, like the cords that are placed upon us at birth, even before we're born. And they want to bust out. So maybe the Amish have it right. I don't know. They have that thing called Rumpelstiltskin, whatever it's called. Rumpelnacht is the German word for putting the Pesach dishes away at the end of Yontif. It's called Rumpelnacht. Look it up. Trust me. You're rumpling is like you're putting the dips. I don't know what the word means, but that's what it's called, Rumpelnacht. But the Amish have this thing called Rumpelstiltskin. It's you know what I mean. It's when they're like 14, 15 years old. They get a year that they can go out and do whatever they want. They go sow their wild oats, and then they come back and they have a fairly good retention rate, from what I understand. There is this, it sounds like that. I don't know. You look it up. It's Delilah's going to email me tonight and tell me what it is. She's going to send me the Wikipedia entry and she's going to tell me here it is. But you know what I mean. So, okay. Okay. Homework. Um, so viewed this way, Shimshon's behavior is anything but impulsive, irresponsible. It's the conscious or perhaps subliminal choice of a man who will not submit to God's uninvited meddling. Right? People like God, people, that's a term I hear not in those words, but God's uninvited meddling. Leave me alone. I remember giving a shiur once, and it was before I was married once, and we're learning, I don't know, complex, and and Gemara. I was teaching a Gemara class, and Gemara always talks about marriage and this and that. So one of the guys just said to me, "Look, can't God stay out of the bedroom?" And I'm like, I'm only 18, I don't know. Right? But people have that feeling like you have to be everywhere, God. Like, I get it. You want to be in the shul, you want to be in the holidays, you want to be in the sukkah, you want to be at the seder, but stay out of my business life. God, what do you care what I do with my bank account? God, what do you care what I do with the IRS? Stay out of it. Lazim Levin. Okay? The Timnite, the Gazan harlot, Delilah, they're all cut from the same Philistine cloth that he longs to hold and feel. A warm and safe cover under which a man may sleep and briefly forget his troubles. Cut my hair, he cryptically cries out to Delilah each time. Divest me of my calling and let me find rest. Give me a break. But like every man who knows that revealing his overwhelming secret will spell his self-destruction, that removing the terrible weight of his calling will lighten the burden, but simultaneously rob him of his deepest identity, Shimshon can only come to that moment incrementally. He doesn't do it right away. It's like, you know what? The Gemara says that when a person breaks halacha, it's very hard. This is the second time he uses this term, nasis lo keheter. It's like it's permitted to him. Because like the first time somebody ate a cheeseburger, it's like, you're like waiting to get struck by lightning, and then you realize not so bad. The second time's not as hard. Oh, okay. These happen in increments. But he knows, but this is obviously much stronger, much deeper, because this is his whole identity, his strength, etc. And he has this mission. So he's probably a very torn and conflicted individual. Okay? It will take 4 discrete, deliberate steps, but each with self-taunting revelation to Delilah, he makes it more and more clear to himself that there could be no turning back. At the beginning of the mutiny, he ties the foxtails together and he sets them on fire. The frightened creatures ran helter-skelter among the Philistine fields of grain as they tried desperately to free themselves of the bonds, but to no avail. Sowing destruction in their wake, the animals quickly succumbed to the flames and expired in a flash of heat and light. Could Shimshon have possibly realized that the exhilarating moment was in fact a premonition and that their fate was to be his? Seeking to be unloosed from the constraints of his calling, again, that play on the words of the binds, the ties that bind, he replays the scene, the broken bonds, the desperate attempt to flee, the uncontrollable destruction, and the self-immolation. There is this short-term gratification or satisfaction, long-term realizing, oh my God, what did I do? And a lot of people, for instance, that leave the fold of Judaism, like you said, they end up coming back to it because what is it? It's those values of family, of ritual, of togetherness, of friendship, of sharing a common bond that they like. It's the oppressive nature sometimes of the religion, or perhaps how it was presented to them or how they were raised. That's what they don't like. It's very hard to separate the two. So they go like all out or all in. Okay? But there could be no rest. But this has a better ending though. There can be no rest for those chosen by God, no place in which to hide from the faithful calling that God imposes. As Shimshon himself realizes, even as he willingly surrendered his magical locks of hair to the Philistine siren and her razor, he could not surrender his identity or his mission. She's called a siren, by the way. The local team of the women's professional hockey, the PWHL, they're called the New York Sirens. Just telling you. Even as he languished in the Gazan prison, shorn of his locks and forlorn, shackled in bronze fetters like a lowly slave to turn the grindstone, and he summoned as derision to be scorned, oh, his hair has begun. And it tells us, that gives us this interesting line, it began to grow back. Remember, it told us that line, which seems to be sort of inconsequential to the story. In the end, Shimshon embraced his calling as he uttered a profound prayer to the unfathomable deity that selected him from before his birth. He's like, give me this one more chance, and I'll make it right. So it's sort of like a tshuva story. He went off the derech. He wanted to go. He wanted to unshackle himself, but in the end, he realized that you can't really. So he said, he calls out to Kodesh Baruch Hu, not to the pagan gods. Let me take care of this. With that, Shimshon fully embraces his mission, bringing the temple of Dagon crashing down and dispatching the arrogant Philistine tyrants. Thus, as the blind judge who only now sees the meaning of it all, Shimshon meets his tragic end. Of all the judges, this is the line, Shimshon is most heartbreaking. Of all the leaders, the most terribly alone. No other judge in the book labors in such isolation, with none of his own people at his side to face down the enemy. Essentially, Shimshon's life is a splendid study in alienation, a profound glimpse into the process that unfolds when a man withdraws from his community, people, and himself. Bereft of tribal ties, estranged from parents and family, he's alone. Only in the final scene, after he has perished in the process of reclaiming his mission, is he reunited with his people and the father and mother whose sage advice he had earlier spurned. His brother and father's clan came down and they carried up his body. That's the end of the last chapter, right? And then as he started, that's how he finished. Okay? And then it says, and he judged for 20 years, even though it had said that already. With this denouement, another great word we're going to get to use a lot, the last of the judges leaves the scene, his greatest exploit and exercise in self-destruction. Because now we're going to have other terrible stories. He's really the end of the Shoftim. At a moment such as this, we're left to pensively ponder one distressing and melancholy question. What might have been? If only Shimshon had accepted his calling, if only his Nazariteship had been broadcast to Israel as the precious gift that it was, what might have been? Before we move on, we dare not ignore the larger question that his calamity glaringly raises, even as the story of Judges now comes to its sorry end. Is it possible that Shimshon's personal challenge is merely a reflection of the larger national tragedy that has unfolded in the book? For like the judge who was chosen against his will, so too were the people of Israel chosen. Like the judge burdened with a precious gift that demanded self-mastery and the prerequisite for success, so too did the people of Israel feel burdened. That's what we've been saying. Enough, God, leave me alone. Like the Nazarite who had foisted upon unborn child while he yet dreamily drifted in his mother's womb, so were the people of Israel given their holy charge unsolicited. And like the judge who sought unrequited love among the Philistines who could never understand, so too did Israel expend their best energies in an attempt to intermingle with the Canaanites, pagans incapable of fathoming the meaning of mission of the chosen people. That's the end of this chapter. But that's really such an unbelievable insight into like who we are and what we do. This whole life, and people struggle with their whole lives. Why do I need it? Like Nachayantif? Really? We just finished Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then we and
The end of their life, they come back to it.
the end of their lives, they come back. What does the Jew say at the end of his life, especially when they're coming to kill you? They say Shema Yisrael. They're not saying the Declaration of Independence. They're not quoting Magna Carta about rights, and they're not quoting hedonists and this and that. Shema Yisrael, right? And that's the story. So this is such a beautiful allegorical way of looking at sort of what's the state of affairs. And I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to. They really, really can. Because we often feel that religion is a burden. And sometimes we want to let loose. Sometimes we want to break free. But we realize that when we break free, then there's a cost that comes with it. There's also the ability to do tshuva. So I think it's also a great tshuva story of, yeah, I didn't ask for this, but here I am. And when it really mattered, and even if it means my ultimate physical demise and my life is going to end, but I want to end on a high note. I want to end literally with a bang. And he takes everyone with him. So, but these 4 chapters and how they are all woven together, but it's woven together with the literary bookends of Bein Tzara'a Uvein Eshta'ol, which is extremely important. So like that. So that puts Shimshon. The next thing we have Pesal Mikla, not a great story. We have The Spies from Dan, not a great story. We have Pelegesh Begiva, really not a great story. Civil War, not a great story. And then we ended up with some stuff. And then that's it. That's really it. But we finished the Shoftim part of it, in other words, the characters, but now we have some like really awful stories. We're gonna have a lot more awful stories until we get to the next book. But we're making good progress here. But really fascinating.
Take it to Florida.
Shmuel. Right?
Okay.
Yeshua, Shoftim, Shmuel.
Going in order.
Yeah. I'll go in order, but because I'm not gonna hack last time, and then if anybody sees Vivian, tell her say hi. Remember her? What's her
I haven't
name?
seen her for a while.
What's her?
She was on Susie's trip in Italy, and then she went from there to Israel.
I just think she doesn't like me anymore. Tell her I'm beginning to take it personally. Um, yeah, I mean, this seems to be what the
Oh, you're saying that when his hair grew back a little bit, that's when he got a little
I
stronger?
think that's what he's intimating, like that not that I got stronger, but maybe he realized like it seems to be an inconsequential fact. If you look in the text, it has no bearing on the story.
No,
Um,
that.
meaning like yeah, they they cut his hair off, okay, and they put him in prison, and then it just says in Chaf Beis, "Vayachal sa'aro shel tzemech kasher galach," and the hair of his head began to sprout after it had been shaven. Well, yeah, of course, that's what happens when you cut your hair; it grows back. But, I think what Rabbi Hatton is saying is that like he's starting to have the realization. He wakes up. Not that he physically got his strength back because he didn't because he had to daven to Hashem that Hashem would give him that, but that oh, okay, I got what I really thought I wanted, but it turns out that's not really what I wanted. It's just sort of like a release. But what's truly important, the hair begins to like, they as they say in one of my favorite expressions in all of modern Hebrew is nafal ha'asimon. So you remember the old phones, the old pay phones in Israel used to have that coin. It was called an asimon.
I
Okay,
think so.
it's a collector's item. Yeah, it's worth 10, and people have it on a necklace. They like have a necklace, not a necklace. But you couldn't, the call wouldn't connect when it would, then you would hear the asimon fall, and then the call would connect. So they say like when somebody gets it, oh, you get the joke, you finally got the joke. They would say, ah, nefala asimon. That's a great expression, beautiful, brilliant expression.
I bet young people don't.
No clue. No idea. No idea. Because then they had those cards. Now, who is a payphone in Israel? Like, if you could, who could find a payphone in Israel? Remember these that when they had those cards, it was like a whole thing. People, oh, I could take the coin with the if I put a string in it, maybe I could take it back to Yasimon, like whatever. I'm sure a lot of phones were ruined by people trying to do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bing, 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 bing. Yeah, we gotta go buy them. Oh my God. But it's a great expression. But that's maybe the hair growing back is Nafala Asimon. It's actually, I think it's a nice chuv idea. But that brings it together. So we're gonna get some more salacious stories. Don't worry, it gets better. So we're not going back to PG anytime soon. Okay, so that's why we have to monitor who can watch this and attend this. So maybe I'll put a rating on the YouTube video or something like MPAA rating of it should be 16 and above, or I don't know, the stuff that gets by on TV today anyway. Who knows? Yeah, 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 okay.